I'm looking at teaching grammar for EAL students and expressive language, so bringing in learning support students as well. Particular focus on upper primary and lower secondary. And my name's Aisha Kamal, and I'm head of inclusion at Jumeirah Baccaleaureate School. Okay, so the agenda for this session is I'll give you a little bit of school context, and then the links to the DSIB indicators, what EAL students need to know. So this is what we've got to teach them explicitly. And then the majority of the session will just be me sharing various ideas and strategies of how I've taught these things. So these are ideas and strategies accumulated over 16 years of teaching experience. I can't take credit for them all. They've come from various places, from various countries. And then we'll end with question and answer. So let's get started. So our school context, we've only been open since 2010, so we're a very new school. We're just under 2.5 years old. We've got 638 students, and we range from pre-K, which is age 3, to grade 11, which is age 18. 65 different nationalities, 357 EAL students. We run 3 different curriculums, so we're a bit of a unique school. We've got IPC in primary, but national curriculum for maths and English, and in secondary, we use MYP, but for grade 11 we use IB diploma. So it's a very mixed bag. And in terms of my role, my context is I support 57 school action plus students. So they're 57 students who have very, very little or no English when they join our school. Okay. The quality indicators that this session is going to link to is 3.1, so the strategies to meet the needs of these groups. 4.1, provision for the different groups. And 5.2, supporting students with special educational needs. And this is the focus on expressive language. This isn't EAL students. It also links to 2.1, which is attitudes and behaviour, because in your pack you have a copy of the affective domain and the areas around affective domains. So emotional connections and things, how children feel, what children value, what children appreciate, their motivation, their attitudes to learning. So it links very much in with that as well. Bloom's taxonomy has always been my starting point for anything to do with language, with literacy, with learning. And it's hierarchical. The base of the pyramid has the basic cognitive domain aspects that students learn, up to the top, which is the higher order functions and the higher order cognitive domains. I've linked these to language functions, and the range of language functions on this slide are the basic language functions. So these are the initial functions. If you looked at any EAL program, naming, sequencing, describing, sorting would be the first areas that people would generally teach. Moving into the higher order language functions. So justifying, problem solving, analysing, ranking, they're those higher order language functions. And all of these language functions have particular skills and have particular language structures around them which need to be taught explicitly to students. So, this is a pretty slide of all the things I teach. In your pack, you've got it as a kind of more helpful teaching sort of slide. It just didn't look very pretty on the page in the PowerPoint, so I'll put it into a different format. So those are all the aspects that an EAL student needs to be taught. What I don't do is teach all of these in a particular sequence. I do start with the basic language functions, but what I don't do, for example, is teach verbs week 1, teach nouns week 2, teach adjectives week 3, because I think to compartmentalise it in that way makes it very tedious for a child, makes it very tedious for you as a teacher, but also compartmentalises learning. Children then don't apply and use what you've taught them in 1 week to the next automatically. if you teach things in a natural progression, looking at language structures as a whole, teaching something specific like nouns or verbs, but within a broader context, it makes it more meaningful for students. So that's my preferred way of working. Right, now that all of that's done, on to the active part. What the rest of the sessions will be is a series of activities. I'll call them linguistic gymnastics. So I'm going to make you jump through hoops. To make it easy for myself, this is a very hard position to be in, to stand up here. But what I'm going to do is, if you'll humour me, is I will run through some of these activities. Some of them I will just explain to you, because the value in you doing them isn't as great. You know, you can pick them up and understand what you do with your children. And some of them, just because they're fun and just because I want to, I'll ask you to join in. So you will essentially be my class, and you will do the activities. And the other reason I'm doing that is because I could stand here for 30 minutes and tell you, you can do this activity for this, and you can do this activity for this. And by the time you leave for lunch, the chances are half of it will be gone. If you've done some of the activities, the chances are you might go into school and do a couple of them with your children, because they'll be at the forefront of your mind. So these are a range of activities that will cover a range of those language functions. And what I'll do is I'll just share a range of activities with you as strategies. So, first one, arose by any other name. Thinking about language structures, I would teach children parts of a sentence structure. So I would teach them that is an article. I would teach them dog is a noun, a common noun. I would teach them the verb, and I would teach them the preposition. And I would teach them that structure. But I wouldn't do it for a week, and I wouldn't necessarily do it for a whole lesson. It would be short, sharp, quick-fire activities. But what I would focus on with my children is, if you told me the dog was by the gate, in my head, I don't know if it's an Alsatian that's going to attack me, or if it's a fluffy dog with a little ball next to it and just wants to play. It doesn't give me a specific image. If you then change that now to Doberman, I'm thinking something very different. I'm thinking, I don't really want to go through that gate. Not with a Doberman. If we change the verb and we change the preposition to he placed himself in front of that gate, I'm 100% certain I'm not going there. It gives me a very strong image. And that's what we've got to teach children to do. But just by telling them, it gives us a really strong image if we change the verb, if we change the noun, if we change the preposition isn't enough. We've got to show them. If the poodle was perched by the gate, I'd happily trot through. But it's showing, explaining, and teaching those aspects and those structures. Okay, I'm jumping ahead now. Another one, word association. Very quick one, very common one, very, very quick and easy to do. Done very often. Just give the children a noun, any noun. So you might say rain, sun, snow, cats, boats, absolutely anything. 30 seconds, 1 minute, you decide on the time according to your children. Write down as many words as you can around that topic. So let's have a go. 30 seconds, sun, go. Any words you want, anything that comes into your mind, there are no right or wrong answers. This is word association. What the word sun makes you think of. Words, phrases, anything you want to do, jot them down, 30 seconds, go. Sun. The word is sun. So you're going to jot down any words or phrases that come to your mind if someone says the word sun to you. So, I won't be lazy, I'll do a couple myself. Oh, lovely, we've got people sharing already. Thank you. Warm, fantastic. Oh, powerful. UAE. Ooh. Contextual.
Sunbathing.
Sunbathing. Sunning, ice cream, fantastic.
Stationary.
Okay, your minds are too fast for my hands. Well done. Morning. Perfect. Yep, morning, absolutely. Morning, sunset, sunrise. So you can see everyone's mind thinks in a slightly different way. They are all correct responses. Nobody's response is wrong. And that's the other thing for EAL students and for learning support students. It's very, very important to build up their confidence. And this is a nice activity to do that. It's a valuable learning activity, but it links back to that affective domain where you're building their confidence. Simple, quick-fire activity, but it's a quick-fire activity, yes.
Can I share something?
Of course you can.
I actually wrote the name of my son because I think we did not spell son. Did you say S-U-N?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Then I was wrong.
That's all right. But
if you just
again,
say son,
this
I thought
is
of my son. That's
me.
what I said.
No, and that's actually a very valuable, I didn't plant that, but very valuable learning experience. I said son, thinking S-U-N. Somebody else has thought S-O-N, which is entirely correct, but I can specify. Again, for EAL students, lots of words have multiple meanings. So, very valuable experience, and thank you for sharing that. You've got to be clear. One thing I wasn't, you've got to be clear. So what you did wasn't wrong. I wasn't clear enough. Thank you. Yeah. So, again, a quick fire, fun way of doing this, alphabet noun sentences. So, in sequence, I won't get you to do this, but in sequence, you get the children to go as far as they can along the alphabet, but every word in your sentence has to make sense. Can be a nonsense sentence, but the sentence has to be grammatically correct, has to start with a different letter of the alphabet. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So for example, a beautiful car drove exceedingly fast. A, B, C, D, E, F. As you get further on, it gets harder. They may have to throw in a connective to help it make sense and to keep going. But again, it's just a fun way of getting children to think and building up those word patterns and those word structures. The other thing I forgot to mention is all these quick-fire activities are really crucial skills that you need to keep on the board. So you need to do these with a lot of frequency so they're learnt, then they're honed, and then they're ready to use. You then need to give children the opportunity to apply those skills. And it's planned opportunities. So, okay. So, looking at sun, this is an example of grade 3 work that I did with my grade 3 students in January. So, we did our quick fire for sun. Children then had to write poems. I said to my children, you can include similes, you can include metaphors, or you can include personification, because that's what they were doing in class. It's entirely up to them. I'll read it because the picture I took, clearly I'm not a good photographer, is quite dull. She was shining brightly up ahead, like a meteorite that travels from space to Earth. She's heating up the world as warm as a roaring fire, like a cozy blanket when I'm cold. She disappears for the night. She meant from the night, but it's okay. From the night, and goes off to sleep, like children sent by their parents. This is a small group of 3 students, so in case you're wondering why it's all different handwriting. So that's from each of those, and those were built from their word associations. So it's getting them to use, apply, and move on. Okay, substitutions. Again, throwing out challenges is great for children. Something very, very simple. Use a visual. Right, my sentence, my story, my poem is going to start with the dark forest. How many alternatives can you come up with for dark? Go, 30 seconds. How many alternatives, how many different words can we use instead of dark that mean the same thing? How many synonyms for dark can we think of?
Laughing, tense,
Gloomy, fantastic. Shadowed. Fantastic. Night. Any from the back? Just to make sure you're with me.
Appalling.
Oh, it's got to mean the same as dark. Oh, thank you, dark can be beautiful. Yeah. I take that back. Dark can be
Can be
beautiful.
appalling.
Absolutely.
Appalling can be.
Appalling. Absolutely. Sinister. Yep. Fantastic. So again, you see dark, we can take it on a beautiful tangent, or we can take it on a sinister tangent. It's entirely up to children. But neither of those are wrong. Both completely correct. Perfect. Well done. Another thing that I would focus on is word order of sentences. Now, children love correcting you if you're wrong. You put up a sentence with a mistake, they're over the moon. They're the first to correct it. If you say, oh, I think you missed something, no, I'll check this, it's perfect. So, if you put up a sentence that doesn't make sense, where the word order is incorrect, and I would put this up on an interactive board so that the words can be shuffled around, so the order can be changed. The cat on the sick is carpet has been. So grammatically, entirely out of sequence, apart from the cat. So getting the children to play with that word order, to play with that sentence structure, to hear and see how the words are placed together. Then getting them to replace and change the different words within that structure. If you change something, do you need to add in an extra word? Do you need to take away a word? And sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But only by getting children to play with that sequence, and I mean physically move the words around. You can have them just cut up on little pieces of paper. Doesn't have to be on an interactive whiteboard. But getting them to actually physically be involved with that sentence structure helps to embed it for them. And a different one, find and replace. So, if I put up the sentence, my mother told me not to shout. Changing the noun. So changing mother. Who could have told you not to shout?
Teacher.
My teacher. I knew that's the first one on my list. The teacher. Anybody else? Let's think imaginatively. So somebody beyond the everyday.
The policeman.
The policeman?
The librarian.
We would hope that's beyond the ordinary day. The librarian.
The nurse.
The shopkeeper, nurse. The doctor.
My daughter.
What about your daughter? I like that. Roles reversed.
My husband.
My husband. I would hope not. Wait, a wicked witch changes that structure entirely. Changes that context. A forest fairy. Sleeping Beauty. Humpty Dumpty. The elephant. A worm. A sunflower. Why not? Changing the verb. Instead of told me not to shout, told me not to run, told me not to climb, told me not to have a bath. Must be done. Told me not to tease the kitten, told me not to eat worms. Told me not to explore the deserted house on the top of the hill. Told me not to float through the air. Told me not to pay attention in class. Not my fault. Who could that be? Me and Sarah thinking of the same children there, because Sarah's from my school. You can also do this with well-known nursery rhymes, well-known traditional tales. Humpty Dumpty. So instead of Humpty Dumpty sitting on the wall, Humpty Dumpty stood on a chair. Humpty Dumpty saw a bear. Humpty Dumpty floated through the air. How would that nursery rhyme change? Where would that nursery rhyme go? Entirely different through a very simple substitution, a very simple change. Thinking creatively, but teaching those skills, those structures. Another quick way before I've skipped on to that too quickly. Charades, acting, miming. If I was to walk through the door, skipping, twirling my hair, how am I walking in? I'm not just walked in, I might have skipped in. If I was to walk in, dragging my feet, shoulders slumped, I might be trudging. But teaching those differences, so again, children are beginning to understand. Walk doesn't tell us anything around emotion. It doesn't tell us anything around the literal, beyond the literal. We need more information to convey those images, and children need the language around those to be able to use those images. So charades is a great way to do it, and children love doing that. Okay, using a text. I don't know how many of you have come across Way Home. It's a fantastic short story, has very, very limited writing in it. It's written by Libby Hawthorne. Not a friend, no royalties for me, but great to use. It's good to use particularly for secondary children, for older children, because of the content of the story. It's about a homeless boy. Yeah. So it's called Way Home. I'll write it up, and the author's Libby Hawthorne. But it's good because the pictures, linking back to what Case was saying earlier, are almost comic style. So again, it has a different appeal to students. There's not a lot of text, so there's not a lot of reading. So there isn't that barrier or that defense mechanism that comes up from students straight away. It's very accessible. So helping students create a semantic web. Semantic web being everything we know about. So it's not the same as a word association. A semantic web, you've got to use the evidence given to you. So if you say something, you've got to be able to back it up. So what you can do with children is a simple quadrant, looking at that opening, looking at that picture. What if you walked into Shane's home, this is his home, and it's actually a cardboard box. If you walked into Shane's home, what would you see? What would you hear? You wouldn't hear the voices of family happily chatting in the background. What would you feel? What would you be thinking? And some of those are higher order skills, those higher order language functions around empathy, and some of them are the literal. But again, it's helping children build that within a context for a purpose. You can do semantic webs around topics as well, to pre-teach a topic, to reinforce a topic. You could do it around particular scenes. So you could start off with an everyday scene. So a semantic web around the supermarket, the playground, the staff room, the dining hall, classroom, your home. Zones of relevance, fantastic. Can't take any credit for creating them. I came across them on a course many, many years ago. And like an archery board. So the target in the middle is where you would put the most relevant words. So this is on an interactive board, and if I come out the slideshow, I can show you. You can drag the words across and drop them. So the words move, they're all separate words. So which one of these words would be most relevant for Shane's home? Shabby. So shabby would go straight into the centre of our zone of relevance. It's most relevant. Which one of these words do we think we might use, but we're not 100% sure? It definitely wouldn't be in the centre, but it might be in one of the outer rings. Cozy. Because for Shane, it might be cozy. For us, it might not be. So cozy could go here, or it could go here, but you would just justify where you want to put it, and it would be entirely correct. Are any of those words irrelevant? Not suited. Luxury. So that would remain outside the zone of relevance. And I would always include some irrelevant words as well, just so that children are beginning to select appropriately. So it's teaching another skill. Emotion scale is a fantastic one. This one I can take credit for. This is entirely mine. If you've seen it somewhere else, they've taken it from me. Right, emotion scale is a good way to teach synonyms and to teach the impact of words. So at the bottom here, we've got a range of synonyms for sad. And what children will do, if you ask them to include sad in anything or that kind of emotion, they will always use the word sad. Very rarely will they go straight to grief-stricken, or depressed, or distraught. They might know those words, they might not, but human nature is to opt for the quickest, easiest word. Sometimes spelling is the barrier. Because I can't spell distraught, I'm not going to put myself out there and write it down. I can spell sad, so that will go straight down, even though I know distraught. So getting the children to place, and again on an interactive board, would drag and drop these. So the strongest sad emotion goes on this side, all the way through to the weakest on the opposite side. So getting them to understand the impact of those words. Then getting them to think around the scenarios in which you would use each of those. When would sad be appropriate? When would grief-stricken be more appropriate? When would distraught be appropriate? And thinking and discussing around those structures. Again, you can use the emotion scale for different scenes. So I've got 3 different scenes at the top from way home, and different emotions in the row above. So fearful, trying to be brave, uneasy, envious, resigned, carefree. Those are different emotions that Shane felt. Now those are words that I've put in there. Those aren't words that I've got from my children, because my children aren't there yet to be able to give me those words. So I need to teach them those words, I need to give them that vocabulary, then they can take ownership of it and begin to use it themselves. So, emotion scale, but when Shane's looking at the cat in the window at the beginning of the story, the children would then tell me which of those emotions would be most appropriate. And they would select those and we would put them in the right place on the emotion scale. And you can do this for anything. And it works really, really well. Again, see, hear, think, feel. The common trio, children respond really well, and they respond really well if you've got colours. Don't know why. I'm sure there's some scientific research somewhere that tells you why, but I don't know it. And they respond really well with the visuals. So what might Shane be thinking? What might he be saying? What might he be feeling around those? And again, that's building in those higher order skills. So these are some of my children's responses. And again, post-its, children love. If you tell them to write it down in their exercise book, not so thrilled to get started. Give them 2 post-its, they're away. Again, some questions. Question harvest is a great way. So getting children to ask questions. And they don't always have to be questions to a person. I find some of the best questions are to something inanimate, so an object, like Shane's poem. What would you ask Shane's poem? What would you ask that cardboard box? If that box could speak and tell you something, what would you ask it? The cat that Shane adopted, what would you ask the cat? So these are some of the questions that some of my children came up with. And again, not my idea, this has been out there for a long time. What we know, what we want to know, and then what comes at the end is what we have learnt. And that's very common, the KWL system. Okay. Prepositions and barrier games, fantastic. I was going to get you to do this, but I think if I get you to do this, we're going to run out of time. But what I would have got you to do is to sit back to back, a partner. So 2 of you just sit back to back so you're not looking at each other. And then I would ask you to fold your paper into 4. Open it up. And then one of you would give instructions to the other person of how to draw a very simple picture. Nothing complicated, so it might just be some waves at the front, a boat in the middle, and 3 birds in the sky. But if I just said to you to draw a boat and some waves and 3 birds, and I don't give you the position, and I don't give you the size, it's not specific enough. So what I would teach children to do is ask a question to clarify. What I would teach the speaker to do, the one giving the instructions, is to give those clear, explicit instructions. What I would do before all of that is get the children to come up with a success criteria themselves. So what's the success criteria for the speaker? They need to speak clearly. They need to give instructions around position, instructions around size, instructions around quantity, any detail they want added. What's the success criteria for the listener? They need to listen carefully. They need to ask if they don't understand. They need to ask for extra information if they need extra information. And then at the end, the speaker would do the drawing as well. The listener would do the drawing, and then you'd share. And then you'd see how similar or dissimilar your features are and why. And often if they're dissimilar, it's because the instructions haven't been clear or the listener's not entirely understood. But practicing those skills really helps children with things like prepositional language, but in a fun way. So we're not doing a worksheet about on, in, to, at, but it's a fun way of teaching. These are common errors in case you read that and thought, oh my word, I don't know why she's presenting, full of errors. Those are common errors that children have around prepositions. So these are the ones I've heard was, I'm very ashamed at it. You did it by purpose. Danielle went in bed. She got in trouble. She got trouble from her mother. They waited for a lot of time on the line. So it's teaching children those structures and also correcting them when they're speaking. Okay. Again, that was going to be a quick activity, but we will skip it. You have it on the slide. So very, very simple sentences, but getting children to use connectives, conjunctions, to bring those sentences together. And again, often when you start with this for children, they will use incorrect connectors. If you say to them, can you use before, they might just use before for all of those. So it's getting them, again, to experiment with. So again, I would put the connectives on little pieces of paper or little cards so that they could put them in and take them out and move them freely. And hear them and say them and see if they sound correct. And it's only by hearing and saying and doing that we build up these skills. Also stressing to the children that each of those different connectors will then take on a different meaning. So, for example, a nice one that I've done with my children is, I was going to throw this around, but I won't. I was going to throw this. This is what I do with my children. So, if I've got a sentence like, you can sit in my chair. Children love sitting in the teacher's chair. So, you can sit in my chair if, and then I'll throw this out to a child, and they've got to complete that sentence. And then they throw it on to the next child. You can sit in my chair, but, and then complete it. You can sit in my chair because. You can sit in my chair when. You can sit in my chair so. All of those will have a different meaning, and it's getting children to become familiar and comfortable around those.
Excuse me, here, how do you choose the student to answer? Do you mention this connective in front of him, or
Yes, yes.
he should do the job?
The children do the job. I'm a great believer in children doing as much as possible, me doing as little as possible. Thinking about curriculum and way forwards for teaching, facilitating is the way forward. So I would teach it, you have to teach it, but then I would get them to play with the words and experiment. And obviously I would intervene and I would support with how and why. So teaching them which of those connectives are very simple. Which of those connectives are similar. So you've got connectives around addition, you've got connectives around consequence, you've got connectives around cause. So teaching them those groups of connectives.
And in case there's more than one possible option.
You would always share that there is.
three.
Yeah, no, I would say that's correct. Are there any others we can use? Yeah.
You ask.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're right. Sometimes there are more than one possible answer, and sometimes more than one is completely correct. Sometimes there's two entirely different ones, but they will work. They will both make sense, but in a different way. Yeah. Again, that was another activity, but you have this on your slide, so you can take it away and do it. I'm just mindful of the time. So again, once you've taught those, you can mix it up and say to children, okay, let's see if we can make all of these better. But a focus on something different for each one. It's a quick fire activity. It's just quick whiteboard work. It's not long exercises on a book, just very, very quick fire. So, can we add an adjective to the first one? Can we add an adverb? Change the adverb for the next one? Can we think of a better word? And then again, showing some examples as well to support. Expanding. Often when EAL children start writing, or children with limited expressive language, what you'll get is some very simple sentences, and you'll get a story that finishes really quickly. So you'll start and they'll say, okay, we're done, we're finished. So, taking an example, so this is one that my grade 2 children wrote. They were doing Jack and the Beanstalk, and that's what one of my EAL students wrote. A giant lived in a castle, he was hungry, he found some food, he went home. Like, fantastic. Can we add any extra information? So, what can we add to the first sentence? Can we add something in between those sentences? Have we got a piece of information we can add in between them? Can we add something to the next sentence? Have we got information we can add between them? So eventually you're building it up slowly with support. So instead of 4 sentences, you might get 8. You might have a couple of complex sentences in as well. But supporting and scaffolding that. Helping them to vary the mood of a piece of writing. So again, somebody wrote, I went to the park, and I said, doesn't tell me how you were feeling. Doesn't tell me anything about the park. But if we add some extra information, or I went to the forest. But if we change it to in the heart of the forest, lived an old woman with her 3 brainless brothers, we've got a bit of humour there, and we've got possibly something sinister as well. But modelling and showing that and sharing and exploring that. Okay, these are fun activities, so I will get you to do these. And we might run into a little bit of lunch as well, slightly. I would teach things like articles. So bring me a pencil, the pencils, and then supporting the children. So, for example, if I wanted one pencil, which one of those sentences? One. If I wanted one pencil, I would use number one. Oh, you're right, you could use number two as well. Repeat that now. But if I wanted a specific pencil, then number two. You were completely right, it could have been one or two for that first one. But if I want only a specific pencil, it would be that. If I want all the pencils, but again, it's showing the children that. Because they will often use the first one or the second one for everything.
And excuse me, here, why didn't you mention flow? Bring me pencils.
Bring me, because I want all of them. And again, it's teaching.
Why isn't it included?
But it's teaching the difference between this and this
That can be used.
This can be used for plurals, and this can be used for a singular, but a singular specific. So this one's specific, and this one's for all. Okay, right. Adverbial phrases, very, very important. And if you're, well, everyone's obviously focused on attainment and progress, but if you're looking for children to move a higher level in their writing quickly, teaching adverbial phrases is a very good way to do it, because then you have a more sophisticated sentence structure automatically. So, adverbial phrases around how, where, or when. And I'll give you a couple of examples, because I might be throwing something new out there for some of you. So, adverbial phrases for how someone does something. So they might do something with painstaking care. They might do something quickly. They might feeling shocked, an adverbial phrase. Pouring the solution in drop by drop. Stirring something slowly. So these are all ways we can start a sentence with an adverbial phrase for how. For where? In the distance. Far, far away. Over the horizon. Deep in the desert. In the supermarket. So all adverbial phrases for where. Adverbial phrases for when, before long. Twice daily, after shopping. Early before the sun rose, after the sun set. So those are all adverbial phrases for when. What I'd like you to do, I'm only going to play you about 30 seconds to a minute of a clip. The link for this clip will be on the website. In fact, no, sorry, the entire clip's on the website. Or it will be by the end of the day. What I'd like you to do is, not play music when you're giving an instruction. What I'd like you to do is think of two adverbial phrases. So for any of those three, choose two and see if you can come up with two adverbial phrases out of the three for this clip, for a sentence starter. See if you can jot down an adverbial phrase for how, where, or when for the clip that we've just seen. I'm rushing you a little bit. We obviously give the children much longer. Would anybody like to share? I'm not going to put anybody on the spot and say you must. Yes?
For
Thank
how?
you.
Excitedly, surprisingly.
Excitedly, well done.
Surprisingly.
So, excitedly, surprisingly, with surprise. Fantastic. Lovely, thank you. Anybody else?
Happily.
Fantastic. Lovely, thank you. So you could do adverbial phrases for any of those. So then rather than the story starting with, there was once an alien, or something very mundane, very ordinary, very natural, it's helping the children move beyond the simplistic into a completely different structure. So adverbial phrases are a great way to do that. Looking at tense, a fun and creative way you can teach tense. So rather than doing lots of exercises around past tense, future tense, present tense, can be think about how this man came to be here and tell the story. So then the children can decide whether they're going to tell this in the past tense, before he ended up in that wall, present tense, he's in that wall now, or if they're going to go into future tense and think about, is he going to get out of that wall and what will happen then? So it's a fun, creative, imaginative way to focus on something that can be quite mundane. For the hover bike, again, another great way of changing that is to invent a new form of transport and describe how it works. That's a great way to use that clip as well. In your pack you've got a copy of the slides, so you could create adverbial phrases for each of those scene shots. Building up sentence structures and story structures, a good way, this is Clyde Forward, this belongs to him, not me, is to have common story starters, but attach an action to them. For EAL students, this helps them pick up those word sequences and those word structures very, very quickly. So, once upon a time, with your hands open like a book, early one morning, Aisha woke up. First thing she thought of was, I'm starving. The second thing she thought of was, I'm going to run downstairs and make myself the hugest breakfast I've ever had. So building in those actions alongside those key story phrases is a good way of embedding those language structures for children so they can then become their own. Reader's theatre, so I will get you to do this. Right, can I have the front 3 rows along both sides? 3 and 4 maybe on that side, because you've got more people on that side. You're number 1, okay? The next 3 rows, you're number 2. Everyone from here to the back, you're number 3. Okay, so number 1s, you're the black underlining. Number 2s, you're red. Number 3s, you're purple. The last pink line is everybody all together. Okay, and I'll tell you the purpose of this after you've done it. So, can we read this out loud together? Number 1s, the black. Number 2s, the red. Number 3s, the purple. And the last pink, everybody. Okay? 1, 2, 3, go.
Max is a cat. He is a big cat.
He's a big fat cat.
He's a black and white cat. Max likes to be in the garden.
He likes to jump and run.
Then he likes to come into the house and go to sleep on my bed. Best of all, he likes to play with me.
Excellent. Well done. First time you do that with EAL students, it won't be as smooth as with you. Obviously, you're clearly professionals. But what this teaches children is that language structure, those language patterns, and also punctuation pauses. When children are reading, when children are writing, often they'll miss full stops, EAL students in particular, and when they're reading, they will miss full stops. So they'll read running straight in one sentence to the next. That doesn't support them to understand and learn the language structures. If you break it up and have them read in this way, it embeds it better and more effectively. So I chose a really, really simple text. On the website, you'll have 2 more advanced texts. One's a play script and one's a non-chronological report. So you can do this with any style of writing, but that really supports children with those language structures. References in text are very, very difficult for EAL students to grasp. So in the first sentence it talks about a tall black figure outside Sophie's house, the figure turning and facing her. He walked on, he came to Mr. Gucci's house, and then he stopped. We've got a tall black figure, we've got an awful lot of he's, we've got the figure, we've got Sophie's house, we've got Mr. Gucci. For some EAL students, all of those are different people and different things. They don't necessarily make the link to that tall black figure is the he. Those references need to be taught and supported. Imitation. Pi Corbett uses imitation, innovation, and invention in sequence. So the top text, which you have, so I'm not going to read out, is Pi Corbett. The bottom text is one of my grade 9 students. So they've imitated that top text. Both of these texts are imitated from To Kill a Mockingbird. So that's been used as the base. We can shift beyond that using the same contextual information of To Kill a Mockingbird to do the courtroom drama. Teaching those higher order language skills of an argument, but giving them the speaking phrase for it. Giving them the vocabulary to express an opinion and use it and hold on to that.
Is this included in language functions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Do you think as a teacher we should name them one by one, or just throughout teaching process, like requests, expressing opinions, or?
Yeah, I would always teach the children the language function we're working on so that they know. So if it's something like descriptive writing, so we're looking at descriptive writing today, so in particular we're going to look at adjectives and we might look at adverbs as well. You can use descriptive writing in your science report. You can use it when you're doing your geography assignment. So making those links very, very explicit, teaching what you're teaching and how it can be applied and used. Yeah, absolutely. So hover bike, again, this is imitation, but this is imitated in the style of the Iron Man. Right, I will very, very quickly end with 3 Pi Corbett bits. So book talk, I won't do this. I don't know if any of you have come across Pi Corbett, but this is his talk for writing. So book talk, writer talk, and reading as a writer. So those are the next 3 slides. So with book talk, the nice thing for children is nothing is wrong. There are no right or wrong answers. It's children just expressing their thoughts, their dialogue about what they're reading. So absolutely nothing is wrong. So it's almost like a word association, but using evidence from the book. So for example, they might, if I was doing book talk with this, I might say, Cole, I wonder if Cole's a boy or a girl. I don't know. It's not clear. But Cole sat quietly. I wonder if Cole's in trouble. If he was in my school, he might be in 111. Grabbed by a piece that he had not known for a long time. Why? He'd been somewhere busy, so he just come to a party? Not sure. So it would be you articulating and verbalising all of your thoughts. And again, that's a very, very difficult skill for EAL students, but something that they need to know taught. No problem. Reading as a writer is similar to book talk, but here you will use the evidence from the text, and you will look at authorial techniques. So, I'm reading this as though the writer. I'm looking at what the writer meant. A door banged. It's a short, sharp sentence. So, it's creating some suspense. Cole jumped. Again, another short, sharp sentence. What was that? A question. So the reader's thrown in a question to engage me straight away. And this is what you would do with the children. You would teach them that this is what's being done. So exactly as I've shared it with you is how I would use it with students. Writing as a reader is where you would model the writing process. So you would write this up bit by bit, explaining the words you've chosen and selected and why. So Coral Ocean stood at the edge of the playground and waited. I've said that she stood on the edge of the playground because I want the reader to know she's isolated. She's by herself. Nobody's playing with her. It's a huge playground and I put her in one corner by herself. No one came near. Short sentence again to emphasize she's alone. She's isolated. And I'm just going to end with learning is a social activity, not to be done in isolation, not words, not exercises, not done on a piece of paper, but fun, quick-fire activities done together. Seeing, hearing, reading, writing, using, revising, and transferring. So pupils always learn best together. Grammar is about organising your thoughts. It's how you choose and how you use words. It's constructing and varying and organising sentences and the order of the words and phrases to convey meaning and sense. So I hope that's been useful. It's just an example of always keeping those visual reminders up for the students to support them so they can always go back to something. If you have any questions, I'm happy to stay. If you'd like to rush and eat because it's been a long morning, you're very welcome to. Please do use these ideas.